Good morning, colleagues. Welcome back to the fourth session of the webinar series on adaptation reporting under the ETF of the Paris Agreement. My name is Brittany Main-Venturan, and I am the Regional Network Coordinator for the Anglophone Caribbean of the CIBIT GSP Transparency Networks. And we're so glad to have you back for another session of this webinar series that is being hosted by the Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency Global Support Program and the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center. So we're also happy to have back our speaker and our expert from our Eurasia region, Ms. Lajana Bundalo. And today's session, we will also be hearing from an expert on loss and damage from the Caribbean region, from Climate Analytics Caribbean. So today's topic will be looking at advanced reporting tools, loss and damage, cooperation, and other best practices, which are all very relevant for the Caribbean context. And just briefly, taking a look at the agenda for today, it will be a little bit shorter, but Flajana will take us through the MPGs of how to report on loss and damage, cooperation, and sharing some good practices and experiences. And we'll have a short Q&A, and then we will hear from our regional expert on loss and damage, on some practical experiences from the region. And then we'll have a short time for additional group discussion, and we will close in the next hour and 45 minutes. Okay, so with that, I would like to introduce and call again my dear colleague and expert, Lajana Bundalo, to take us through her portion of today's webinar on the MPGs.
Thank you very much, Brittany. Thank you all for joining us to this last technical webinar on the MPGs for reporting adaptation within the BTRs. So as discussed earlier with Brittany, this is very much pleasure for me to spend this time for you and share this information, but also to learn from you, from your practical experiences on adaptation reporting. So it's really good to know some good practices that you already implement in your countries. So as Brittany already said, we are sorry. We are today looking at the guidelines for the sections G, H, and I. So I will share my screen now. Just confirm that you see. Can you see?
Not yet. Oh, yes, now I can see.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So thank you, Brittany. So as I said, this is an overview of the sections G, H, and I. In this, the guidelines, MPGs contained with these sections are a bit outside of the main component of the guidelines dedicated to reporting on adaptation and addressing loss and damage in section G, cooperation, knowledge sharing, and strengthening research and scientific knowledge in section H, and any other information in section I. So let's focus on section G. Before start with the actual provisions from the MPGs, I would like to quickly provide an introduction to the concept of the loss and damage. it's very important to stress that there is no widely agreed definition of the loss and damage in the context of the climate change. So for this presentation, we agreed to use a definition that refer to, as a loss and damage, refer to the actual and or potential manifestation of the impacts associated with climate change that negatively affect human and natural systems. So loss and damages related to climate change can be caused by two categories, two types of the climate hazard: extreme weather events and slow onset events. So extreme weather events are single discrete events with a clear beginning and end, like storm surge, droughts, heat waves, floods, etc. On the other hand, slow onset events are long-term phenomena caused by intensified and intensified by anthropogenic climate change that take place over prolonged periods of time without a clear start or end point, like sea level rise, salinization, ocean acidification, desertification, etc., etc. So there is no clear start or end point for the slow onset events. The term loss and damage is very often used as a single term, but we can say that generally damages refer to negative impacts that are not necessarily permanent. So this is something repairable, recoverable. And also they are known as economic costs associated with climate impacts, and they can be expressed in monetary value. So they also can be quantified through structured assessments, like post-disaster need assessment, scientific surveys, modeling, etc. Damages caused by extreme weather events and related costs can be divided in three categories: direct costs, indirect costs, and risk management costs. Direct costs are costs that occur as a direct result of the event in question. So damage or a loss, loss of the property, a loss of the households, etc. And then direct costs are the costs that occur due to the domino effect of the original event, like loss of income from tourism or result of damage caused by storm, etc. Risk management costs are the costs of measures implemented in order to reduce the extent of loss and damage incurred when extreme weather events do occur. So risk management measures could include costs of operating of an early warning system for climate hazards, or the costs of responding to the hazards, like for instance when you are evacuating citizens at the risk. Losses generally refers to impacts that are permanent, so they are not repairable. Also, loss is known as non-economic loss and damage, which are intangible in nature and very often hard to define and measure. So then loss cannot easily be quantified in monetary terms, because the term loss are not typically marketed. So as such, non-economic loss and damage, or just losses related to climate change, are really difficult to assess, and there are some methodologies developed by economists, scientists, they are different and not aligned, not agreed, etc., etc. There is a discussion undergoing on this issue. For better understanding, loss can be divided in 5 broad categories, like loss of human mobility and territory, like loss of territory due to sea level rise or decreased habitability of an area due to prolonged climate pressures and other examples. Also, there is a loss of life and health, like direct loss of life or reduced life quality, meaning injury or sickness due to direct impact of climate change, and also a reduced life quality due to the indirect impact, like mental health issues caused by loss of lifestyle due to climate change. Then also we have biodiversity and ecosystems, loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services, like which are also caused by the climate pressures. Then a loss of cultural heritage and indigenous knowledge, meaning loss of cultural sites or a loss of indigenous knowledge that is associated with cultural identity, etc. Then also loss of sense of place and social cohesion, like loss of sense of belonging and identity that is related to loss of land, for example, and decrease in social cohesion among certain communities due to migrations caused by the climate change impact. Before I focus on the specific chapter, I will stress, and it's important to say that unlike the rest of the guidelines for the BTR, the guidelines related to loss and damage use word prefix may as a prefix instead of word should. So this actually means that reporting on loss and damage is considered to be more voluntary than other information requested by the guidelines for adaptation reporting. So as such, it is anticipated that country really, if they really want to report on loss and damage, they will include this information in their BTRs. The main goal of the section G is to provide countries with an opportunity to report on loss and damage within their BTRs. And information here can be divided in 3 broad categories. First is information about losses and damage that have been or are expected to be suffered as a result of the climate change. Then information about actions your country is implementing or planning to implement to manage present and future losses and damages, and institutional arrangements that your country has to facilitate the management of a loss and damage. The request for information about loss and damage is made by bullet point A, which says observed or asked information about observed and potential climate change impacts, including those related to extreme weather events and slow onset events, drawing upon the best available science. This request actually asking for countries to provide descriptions or estimations of loss and damage that has already been incurred or observed, and descriptions or estimations of loss and damage that are expected in the future. In both of these cases, loss and damage relevant to being reported here can be related to either extreme weather events or slow onset events. Wording in this bullet point which says drawing upon the best available science suggests that information provided here should be as robust as possible, considering the reporting country's national circumstances. Actually, countries should aim to rely on assessments that are able to attribute losses and damage to the climate change. However, in many cases, conducting such assessments require a certain quality of data and resources that not all countries possess, particularly SIDS and LDCs, whom are actually most likely to want to report on this issue. However, in the absence of the formal assessments, countries could address this by using approach like simple reasoning or other alternative proxy. For the countries that decide to report on past and experienced loss and damage would ideally be able to present information about direct and indirect economic costs and non-economic costs. It is very likely that majority information provided by country will be mostly focused on direct economic impacts, like direct damages of extreme weather events in your countries. This can be due to the lack of assessment methodologies and framework for assessing the full non-economic costs of extreme weather events, and the inherent uncertainties associated with assessing loss and damage related to slow onset events, economic and non-economic. However, this should not prevent countries interested in reporting on loss and damage from doing so. So in the absence of more robust assessment methodologies, information on loss and damage could be instead captured by more qualitative means like case studies. Providing information in this form is not perfectly robust, but it's better than not communicating or recording this information at all. In absence of the data, narratives and case studies can be used by countries as one of the effective means of conveying how certain types of losses and damages are being experienced within the territory. Some good examples of what such case studies could look like you can find in the document Loss and Damage Case Studies from the Frontline, and also in the publication of the Climate Refugees, for which you can use the links provided on these slides. As already mentioned, when reporting on loss and damage, countries can report on both observed loss and damage and anticipated ones. For these, countries will need information that is typically generated by different processes like post-disaster impact assessments, scientific studies, and scientific assessments. As you can see from the table on the right side, potential information for losses and damage due to extreme weather events can be like for past losses and damage. Potential information source can be post-disaster impact assessment, case studies from affected communities. Then for the future losses and damages, Also scientific assessment that integrate climate impact modeling, attribution science, observational data, and historical records. For past losses and damage due to slow onset events, a source of information also can be scientific studies and technical reports like IPCC and other databases. So moving to the next area of information requested by section G, actions to manage loss and damage. So this section asks countries to describe actions planned or implemented that relate to managing loss and damage. Under bullet point B, guidelines are asking for information about activities related to averting, minimizing, and addressing loss and damage associated with the adverse effects of the climate change. This request in its base is the same request made by the guidelines for the information on adaptation actions planned and implemented, but here just refers for the actions that relate to the loss and damage, and it's expected that countries approach reporting on these actions on the similar way. Presentation of this information is basically clear. Identifying activities constitute managing loss and damage could be more tricky as they are often not framed as such. So due to their conceptual closeness, it's often difficult to identify which actions should be framed as a managing a loss and damage and which actions should be framed as adaptation or disaster risk reduction. Actions that manage loss and damage are actions that reduce the scale of loss and damage when loss and damage cannot be avoided. These actions will differ depending on whatever they are managing losses and damage due to extreme weather events or losing and damages related to slow onset events. Actions that manage loss and damage are actions that reduce scale of loss and damage when it cannot be avoided. Some examples of measures that do this for extreme weather events include risk retention, which is actually self-insurance measures which can build up the resilience of the population or the state to unexpected damages incurred due to climate events. Risk retention measures can include establishing or strengthening social protection schemes aimed to build resilience among the population and establishing catastrophe funds to increase the state's ability to offset unexpected damages caused by extreme events. Or also the second example of the measure is the risk transfer measures such as insurance, catastrophe bonds, and other financial instruments that enable countries to shift the economic risks of extreme weather events to the third parties, in this case, for example, insurers. Interestingly, under these definitions, actions that qualify as a risk reduction, for example, construction of seawalls or establishment of early warning systems that are commonly reported as effort to manage loss and damage, would not actually count as managing loss and damage, as they would strictly qualify as adaptation or DRR. which is actually depending on one's perspective. Regardless to that, however, countries can report on these actions anyway, as they are, and they represent an important part of the loss and damage. Measures to manage loss and damage from slow onset events include establishing or strengthening institutional arrangements and establishing governance schemes to manage gradual changes in resources. The first one aims to facilitate cooperation amongst agencies and other stakeholders in performing tasks necessary for managing the impacts of slow onset events, like assessing current or emerging climate stressors, or formulating policy and enacting legislation. The other measure to manage loss and damage, establishing governance scheme, aims to deal with socioeconomic consequences of the changes, like examples for that are voluntary or involuntary migration. On this table, you can see some examples of the actions for addressing economic and non-economic losses and damages. So for extreme weather events that can be social protection actions, including pre-disaster financial support, or risk layering, risk retention, risk transfer, early warning systems, loss and damage databases to support decision making, etc. That is actions that can be implemented to address issues ahead of the climate event. In the same time, there are some actions that can be implemented during or post climate event, like humanitarian assistance, short and long-term recovery and rehabilitation, support for rebuilding, compensation, etc., etc. You have here on this table different potential actions for measures that can be implemented ahead of climate event or post-climate event, including extreme weather events and slow onset events, but also for addressing economic losses and damages, and actions for addressing non-economic losses and damages. At the end, Section G asks countries to provide information about institutional arrangements to facilitate the implementation of activities referred to in paragraph 115b. This request reflects earlier guidelines provided in Section A, which request information about institutional arrangements for facilitating adaptation. As such, countries with pre-existing institutional arrangements that have been established to manage loss and damage could approach reporting on this information in BTR in a similar manner to how they approached reporting on other institutional arrangements. Also, when reporting on these institutional arrangements, countries could report on any legal instruments, laws, and acts that mandate the government to act to address loss and damage. The main goal of the Section H is to ensure countries provide information about the cooperation, good practices, experiences, and lessons learned. The information requested here can be divided into broad categories. First is efforts to collaborate or share knowledge, And the second is sorry, efforts to strengthen scientific research and knowledge systems. So bullet point A here is asking countries to report on efforts it has made to the country has made to share information, good practices and experiences and lessons learned. Countries here should consider reporting on all forms of cooperation, knowledge sharing activities, etc., that are deemed relevant to report on and have meaningful relevance to adaptation or loss and damage. This could include, for example, participation in regional adaptation programs and research projects or cross-border initiatives, participation in regional forums, programs, or initiatives aimed at sharing experience and lessons learned, good practices, etc. Also, under this section, countries could choose to provide descriptions of any of the good practices established, interesting experience they had and lessons learned they have been sharing through the events and initiatives being reported on. Although this is not specifically asked by the guidelines in section H, providing information to this effect will enable countries to sharing potentially useful information with an international audience to contribute to the global pool of knowledge or to help developing countries gain recognition for certain aspects of their national adaptation processes that have been particularly successful. So moving to the second area of information requested by section G, which is asking countries to report on activities that strengthen scientific research and knowledge, specifically in relation to climate, research, systematic observation and early warning system, vulnerability and adaptation, and monitoring and evaluation. Here, countries should report on actions that increase the country's knowledge and understanding of the range of the fields directly related to adaptation, like vulnerability, adaptive capacities, methodologies to monitor or evaluate adaptation, etc. And also on actions that increasing the country's capacity to generate relevant data that may in turn lead to increase in the equality of scientific research, knowledge generation, and early warning system. For example, upgrading systematic observation systems or expanding capacities for monitoring and evaluation systems, etc., and other actions. And finally, section I asks for any other information. So there is no specific guidance in the same manner as for section from A to H. As this section, it does not make any targeted requests for information. And actually, this section allows countries to include any additional information relating to adaptation and climate impacts that is not previously outlined, that is not outlined by guidelines and that is not previously reported within the adaptation chapter of the BTR. In the other words, countries can include any other information related to adaptation they find relevant or they want to share. So at the end of this technical part of our webinar, I would like to share some important messages for you in regards of your adaptation reporting within the BTR. So it's important to say that adaptation reporting within the BTR is voluntary. So countries can decide to report or not adaptation within the BTR, or also they can decide to report adaptation within the previous framework, meaning within the national communications every 4 years, or to prepare adaptation chapter for every 2 years. So it's up to each country. Also, it is important to stress that adaptation BTR is entirely country-driven exercise. So countries can decide how and to what extent to report, and this decision is based on the capacities of each country in regards of, reporting data, human capacities, etc. And also it needs to be based on their interest to share their information about adaptation process, achievements, some gaps, etc., etc. So also it is important to say that most of information contained or that should be reported and can be reported within the adaptation BTR, countries can find in their recently submitted reports, meaning within the national communications, adaptation communications, national adaptation plans. And in addition to that, countries can add any new information in specific sections that have from recent developments, like from new research, new reports, new vulnerability assessment studies, etc., etc. Also, in regards of the reporting, it is important to stress that countries needs to look how to align your BTR timeline reporting with other reporting requirements, so to reduce burden if it's possible. So there are some good examples from Asia that I saw, where countries prepare timetable of all reporting obligations that they have, and then make adjustments in their reporting timetable in order to combine reports or to prepare similar reports or reports that contain similar or overlapping information, that to prepare them in the same period, so to engage the same team of the people, to provide same data flow channels, etc., etc. Also, it is important to say that there are different modalities of submission of the UNFCCC reports. So in context of the BTR, you can submit your BTR together with the national communication. Also, you can submit national communication and adaptation communication as a combined report. Also, BTR and adaptation communication as a combined report, and then 3 reports as a combined report, meaning national communication, BTR, and adaptation communication as a combined report, meaning together. So thank you very much. This was my last slide. If you have any questions, yeah, I'm very eager to answer, and also to engage in discussion with you, to share, to hear your experiences and maybe some good practices that you implement in your countries when it comes to the adaptation reporting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'll stop now. Yeah, Brittany, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sajana, for for providing those last takeaway messages from combining the combining the content from the MPGs for adaptation reporting over the last 3 sessions, and now today the fourth technical session. Yeah, definitely loss and damage reporting is one that is new, and but definitely important for this region, especially as the history of loss and damage has been championed by SIDS in the negotiations. But yes, colleagues, I'd like to open up the floor to hear from you. Perhaps you have questions, and then also any experiences from your own national context, or otherwise in adaptation reporting, or also regarding loss and damage or best practices. Any from the floor? If not, then I had a question actually, Snajana. This is it's no news that adaptation and loss and damage is an area that is newer to me in my portfolio, and I often find it hard to differentiate between actions that would be considered loss and damage versus regular adaptation actions. And you gave a couple examples. One of being the seawall, for example. Maybe if you could give another example or another way that would make the distinction clear for especially for folks like me who uh, work less in this adaptation space, but always have the question.
Thank you very much, Brittany, for this. This is very important question, and many countries, are also they are wondering what is the difference between the regular measures that we know on adaptation, and also what is the difference between the disaster risk reduction and adaptation, and how to put all of that in the context of the loss and damage. So yeah, it's a bit confusing, and loss and damage now it's really for the first time included in the ETF or transparency reporting framework, and it's really for the first time we have at least some guidance for information that countries need to provide in that context. So just to explain briefly that loss and damage actually is the impact of the climate change that occur because not enough mitigation, adaptation, or DRR actions and measures has happened. So when we exceed all what when event exceed all what we have done of actions, meaning mitigation, adaptation, or DRR, then we have then we experience loss and damage. So that's the impact of the climate change within the loss and damage. So loss and damage refers actually to the negative impacts of the climate change that occur despite of our mitigation and adaptation efforts. So, and also disaster risk reduction can be considered as a part of the adaptation. So if we are not able from any reason to reduce disaster risk, then we will have loss and damages. That's simply logic behind of this.
Thanks so much. I know that I put you on the spot with that question, but it's very clear now. It's very clear now the distinction between the three. So thank you very much, colleagues. The floor is still open if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, I would uh, like to prompt some questions before we get into our second segment. Share my screen. And I will invite you again to go to, oh, before I share my screen. Ansel, please go ahead. I see you have a question.
Yes, I wanted to ask Slajana, when it comes to loss and damage, I note that entities such as German Watch, for example, they publish regularly information on climate risk index. They have a climate risk index which considers loss in GDP and perhaps human mortality because of climate change and these events. To what extent would information that is aggregated in that index in those reports, could that help to inform? Because I would imagine it is based on national information, national data, national information that they take and aggregate into that report. Would some of that be acceptable? You'll have to perhaps report it a bit more specific, but I'm not certain what would be the connection.
Ansel, thank you very much for this question. Yes, this information about the loss and damage should consider a national information about the national circumstances or national level of the loss and damage. But since I believe many countries, and I know that many countries still do not have developed systems for regular tracking and reporting of the loss and damage, any information, even it's regional, any information on experienced loss and damage that you have, you can report on that. In the absence of any information, even it's regional, you, as I mentioned here during the presentation, you can use case study information which are published, or also you can use published news about some loss and damages experienced during some events, etc., etc. So any information is better than no information. But if you have national level information, that's the best level. I think. I hope that I've answered.
Thank you. Yes.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Do you have any other questions or comments from the audience?
Maybe I would like to add here maybe something. Yeah, I've said at my last slide that the adaptation reporting is a completely country-driven exercise. Also, it is important to say, yes, you have the guidelines, MPG requests for certain information about adaptation, but you don't need to strictly, align your reports to the guidelines or to the specific requests. You can provide any information as per your, as you have available in context of the adaptation. So don't strictly stick to the guidelines, but report any information on the adaptation process, actions, impacts, etc., etc. So anything is very much welcomed any information about the adaptation reporting if your country decides to report on this way. So it's really a country-driven exercise. So you have full freedom to report on the way that's more suitable to your circumstances, capacities, information that you have available, etc., etc. The guidelines are here just to help you and to lead you through this process and to actually give you an idea of what type of information you can report in relation to adaptation. So over to you, Megan.
Thank you, Snejana. And thank you for wrapping us up there with noting that this session, this part of the MPGs are voluntary and discretional for countries, so not to limit nor overburden countries with this. But I think that was well said. Okay, colleagues. So I just have a couple of questions just to gauge, just to gauge your knowledge and your experience right now. I have shared a Menti link in the chat, and I also have a QR code on the screen to join the short Menti, just to gauge your impression and experience in adaptation reporting. So let me know when you have the screen, and I will share my other screen. Okay. One moment, colleagues, as I switch my screen. Apologies. Here we are. Okay. Those who are in, there's also a link. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how familiar are you with reporting on loss and damage in the context of climate change adaptation? 1 being not familiar, 5 being very familiar. This is an introduction for some of us in the audience, and others are at different levels. Okay, so there's still some to learn and some experiences to learn from. Very good. What do you consider one of the biggest challenge in reporting on international cooperation for adaptation? Or if you have of these and difficulty in attributing results. What is considered the results of the adaptation efforts? Okay. Perhaps in this region, I see that limited data availability to even make these assessments, okay, is taking the lead. And in your country or in your institution or experience, which sector has the most well-documented good practices in adaptation? Which of these sectors? Water, agriculture, coastal protection, forestry. That's well-documented good practices as well. It depends on the type of country. I think we're all coastal. We're all coastal countries and islands, and for the most part in the audience today. So you could see that coastal protection could often have the most well-documented good practices, often because it's probably the highest need or most urgent need to have coastal protection actions. And lastly, what type of information do you find most valuable when learning about other countries' adaptation experiences? The quantitative side of the project outcomes in terms of numbers of and metrics of impact, the qualitative descriptions of the challenges and solutions, case studies of specific initiatives, policy and regulatory frameworks, details on financing mechanisms. So this one seems to be a bit balanced out. I suppose it depends on what we're looking for, right? So the majority is the qualitative descriptions of the challenges and solutions. So what the challenges were and how they were solved, and this is helpful in the best practice learning from other countries' best practices. Okay, very good. So thank you, colleagues, for participating in this session. It says for joining us, but thank you for participating in this exercise. So that was very useful, and it will continue to be for us as well as we plan our future activities and other areas in other technical sessions in adaptation. And what I would like to do now is take us to the other side of the other portion of today's webinar, where we will be hearing from practical experiences from our special guest, Ms. Sasha Jensen Singh. She is the loss and climate diplomacy expert in the Climate Analytics Caribbean and climate diplomacy team, where she works with small Caribbean, small island developing states to address critical issues related to loss and damage, adaptation, and climate.
Brittany, sorry, but we are losing you.
And she
we cannot hear you
and
well.
civil society sectors. Uh-oh.
Yeah, there is some interruptions within your connection.
Oh my. Okay, sorry about that, colleagues, but I will address my connectivity. If you can hear me now, welcome, Sasha Jatin Singh. I hope you can hear me at least for this short introduction, but I would like to hand it over to you to take us through some of the national and also regional experience that you have in loss and damage and cooperation. Thanks so much for being here with us.
No problem. Thanks so much, Brittany. And well, hi everybody. Thank you all for being part of this session and allowing me to present. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay, let's see.
You should be able to share your screen.
Let's see. 1 minute. It's not that. It's this laptop has like a lot of controls on it. So one minute. Let me just see if it will work now. No, it's not. Okay. Here.
I think she will be rejoining to update her settings. But in the meantime, colleague Sajana, can you hear me more clearly now? I changed my connection.
Yes. Now it's better.
Thank you. Thank you, Brittany.
Hi, everyone.
Great.
Apologies about that. I guess my internet connection. So currently I don't have permission, I'm saying, to share my screen.
One moment.
I guess, in the meantime, while we're sorting that out, I could, just provide a little bit of background. Um, so I Sasha Jatin Singh, as Brittany said, I'm the loss and damage expert at Climate Analytics Caribbean, and Climate Analytics is a global climate science and policy institute, and we have offices around the world, and we're our work really focuses on driving and supporting climate action aligned to the 1.5 degree warming limit, and we're headquartered in Berlin, and the Caribbean office, which is based in Trinidad and Tobago, is our newest office. And the work of the Caribbean office really is um, on working with Caribbean governments to um, to see how we could integrate the Paris Agreement obligations into national policies and plans and actions as well. And we also work with civil society on capacity building and awareness raising, and to see how they could engage on climate decision-making processes at the local, national, and regional levels. I see I have permission, so let's see if we
Yes.
could try this again. Okay, so are you able to see my screen? What
Yes.
what is what is
Yes.
what is showing up?
I can see your full screen in full screen
Okay.
mode.
Okay, great. That's great. Um, so yeah, this is just a bit about climate analytics, who we are, and so on. And what we realized, and I wanted to give like some, a little bit on loss and damage and so on, but I realized that the previous presenter probably would have done that, so I won't do that. I think just based on the presentation before, and I came into the final part of it, and what was raised was the fact that especially in the Caribbean, we don't really have a lot of data, or we don't know what we're reporting on when it comes to loss and damage. And the Caribbean office led assessment, a 30-year assessment of how we assess and report on loss and damage in the Caribbean. And we launched this report, a review of loss and damage in the Caribbean, 1994 to 2024, at the SBs in Bonn. And this is the link. And the reason why we did that is, as we said, we're experiencing widespread loss and damage every year throughout the Caribbean, but we don't have any sort of comprehensive assessment of loss and damage in the region. And some of the research questions we asked were, how is loss and damage being framed in the Caribbean? What are some of the existing tools, methodologies, and mechanisms that have been used to assess loss and damage? What is the extent of loss and damage that has been experienced in the region? And what are the projected future costs of loss and damage for the Caribbean? And in terms of the methodology and approach, it was a desk-based study. So we reviewed scientific and gray literature for the CARICOM member states over the last 30 years. And this included national reports to the UNFCCC over the 30-year period. So that could be the NatComs, NDCs, NAFs, and BURs, and also any publicly available assessments for specific climate disasters in the region. So that mainly focused on the post-disaster needs assessment reports, as well as the damage and loss assessment reports that were done throughout the 30-year period. And in terms of the key findings, what really came out is that there is no internationally agreed definition of loss and damage in the international climate change regime. However, loss and damage is consistently framed as a climate justice issue by Caribbean small island developing states that requires international support versus national responsibility. And another key finding was that, we have various methodologies that were being used to assess the costs associated with climate-related disasters, but the DALA, the Damage and Loss Assessment, and the PDNA, the Post-Disaster Needs Assessment, were the most widely used in the region. However, none of the methodologies currently used to assess loss and damage utilize the specific UNFCCC framing of loss and damage. That would be extreme and slow onset events, economic and non-economic loss and damage. Other key findings from the report was that, like 9 out of the 14 CARICOM countries that that was part of the study actually mentioned loss and damage in their latest NDCs. And that's the list: Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, Haiti, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So, that's a substantial number that actually have been incorporating loss and damage in the NDCs, or a mention of it. And what we also found that, the existing loss and damage studies generally tended to focus on specific climate events and don't provide a holistic account of the total loss and damage experienced by the region from multiple climate hazards. And that's quite important. We're in the tail end of the hurricane season here in the Caribbean, and we've had hurricanes and tropical storms affect countries with multiple times within this period. But we're not getting that sort of like cumulative loss and damage costs or assessment within this for the countries or for the region. And then also hurricanes or floods were the most widely reported climate hazards, particularly economic and non-economic loss and damage that were reported. So we weren't reporting on the other climate hazards, sea level rise, or if we're looking at drought as well, or heat waves. So we have good, I guess, assessments or estimates and so on loss and damage costs from mainly hurricanes and floods, but very little on the other sort of climate related events that affect the Caribbean. And then also we had, only a few regional studies that actually focused on non-economic loss and damage. But this largely used a sectoral framing to highlight these impacts. And most of these came from the agricultural sector. So we're seeing that there are gaps, in how we're reporting on loss and damage. We are reporting on it, but there's still more to be done. But we have data that exists that could be used for the BTRs. And in terms of some of the recommendations that came out of this report, what we're seeing is that we definitely need to develop a common regional approach for loss and damage assessments and reporting. So, this common approach for the Caribbean could draw upon the DALA and the PDNA, but it could also incorporate, appropriate economic and non-economic loss and damage indicators that's relevant to the region or to vulnerable communities. So we could ensure that, we have a more balanced estimation of the costs of climate-related impacts. And this would also allow us to, develop a common definition and understanding of what loss and damage means for the Caribbean region, just given the fact that we don't have any official definition as yet. So there's a lot of uncertainty or ambiguity in what should be reported as loss and damage. It'll be useful for us to define that and define a common approach on how we're going to assess and report on it. And this will be a crucial first step for meeting the loss and damage financing needs in the Caribbean. Another key recommendation from the report was that we should estimate the funds you need to address loss and damage. And, financial loss and damage estimates should ideally include a costing of national actions and or planned activities to address or respond to loss and damage. And among the Caribbean small island developing states, only Haiti actually has started to include a detailed costing of activities related to L&D from climate change. So they've been identifying and costing the actions needed to address the impacts of loss and damage. And this is quite useful because it will help to prioritize and identify what are the activities to respond to loss and damage that would be essential for countries, and to define this as what the loss and damage finance needs are. And then another key recommendation was that Caribbean countries should really report loss and damage finance needs in the BTRs, right? And I think we all know this might be quite difficult, but we still have this opportunity to start doing this and start providing this data in the BTR. And when we're calculating the financing needs to respond to loss and damage, it's not just only looking at these are the estimated losses and damages, but it really requires what are the response activities that need to be costed. So, for example, it could be, how much would it cost to relocate people in response to sea level rise? Or how much would it cost to rebuild, schools or hospitals or bridges that were damaged after a hurricane or a tropical storm or flooding, for example? So, as I said, countries are only now just starting to articulate what their loss and damage priorities are. And so far, only Haiti and Vanuatu in the Pacific have included specifically costed loss and damage activities so far. But this will be quite useful, since this will help to inform any sort of financial needs assessment. But in the BTRs, it will be useful for Caribbean countries to start using whatever existing data on observed climate-related disaster losses, which could be both economic and non-economic. And as I think one of the interventions were that you could use, if it's articles or stories on observed loss and damage and lived experience, to really add to how we're reporting on loss and damage in the BTRs. Observe climate-related disaster losses, and also trying to also incorporate any sort of associated recovery costs, because these would be quite useful to serve as proxies until more comprehensive assessments become available. So these observed losses, they're a useful starting point to determine what the cost of response would be. So, if we know the value of a destroyed hospital or school, for example, that would be a good basis to determine what would be the cost to rebuild that hospital or that health center or that school. And we've already been utilizing observed climate-related disaster losses to highlight loss and damage burdens in other reporting contexts under the UNFCCC. So we can, we have precedent for utilizing that. And then the final recommendation was that, we should look at tagging, tag and track loss and damage in national plans and budgets. So countries like Antigua and Barbuda, they've actually started implementing climate budget tagging and tracking in their fiscal budgeting processes to track their climate-related expenditures and investments. And this particular initiative is being supported by the NDC partnership. And when you start doing climate budget tagging and tracking, it could allow governments to monitor climate-related expenditures and investments within their fiscal budgets and public sector investment programs. And it could serve as a tool for the improved assessment of what the financing needs and how to strategically allocate resources to address loss and damage at both the national and subnational levels. And this is quite useful because what you're seeing now is that there might be a need to have a specific loss and damage tag when we're doing climate budget tagging and tracking. So so these are just some recommendations and some examples of of how countries in the Caribbean are starting to report or on loss and damage, and how they are incorporating loss and damage financial needs assessments and reporting nationally in their work currently. And I think that's it in terms of my presentation. So I want to say thank you very much. And it's just to say that after this report actually came out, we had another study. I'll just stop sharing. Oh, so it stopped sharing. Okay. So another report actually came out after this particular study, which provided guidelines on two countries on how to report on loss and damage for to the BTR. So I'll actually share that in the chat with you all as well. I just, because my tab's closed, I have to now go and look for it. So just give me 1 minute and I'll share it in the chat. But if anybody has any questions and so on, I'll be free to respond.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much for that, for your presentation, Sasha. And as usual, it's a pleasure to have our other fellow regional organizations participate in this process, especially as the audience is a lot of the Caribbean countries who are in the process and in the high time right now of preparing their BTRs, whether some for this year and others for next year sometime, with the flexibilities that they can apply. So colleagues, if you have any questions for Sasha, please go ahead. It was extremely useful, the recommendations that you shared, and the amount of accounts and experience that exists in the Caribbean alone. It's plenty.
So I don't have access to the chat.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
No, that's on me. But okay, we'll you could send it to me and I will allow you
No problem.
access.
So I'll share the report that I presented on, and I'll share the guidelines on how to report on to the BTR that we developed as well.
Let me I'll change the settings. In the meantime, I see you had a hand up from Ansel. Just go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Excellent presentation, Sasha. Thank you very, very much. I'm waiting for those links because it is going to make my work much easier, right? Let me tell you that one of the projects we have here at the 5C is funded by the EU. Is designed to really it's building climate resilience, reducing risk by building climate resilience, right? And one of the things I had mentioned earlier that so one of the indicator is the change across the region on the climate risk index by German Watch. And so that is certainly one, but also we have been looking at any changes in terms of countries at least putting in some national development plans or whatever to monitor losses from climate risk, from climate change, right? For example, Belize this year, when Belize completed its medium-term development strategy, they're referenced in this strategy to review the value of damage, loss, and rehabilitation resulting from natural disasters. So we see that it may not necessarily appear maybe in the NDC, it may be in a medium-term development strategy or some other related document. But so I mentioned, so that is why I find it interesting, right? But what I was going to ask is if you can share the link for the report from which you based your presentation, because it will certainly help to get a bit more information. Thanks.
So I was able to just share it, and then also the guidelines on how to use existing databases to report on loss and damage in the BTRs, because we saw that was a need that came out from this report.
Fantastic. I agree that I'm so happy that you've been able to access the chat, because these resources will be extremely valuable to countries, and also our our regional offices and project managers who will also be supporting countries uh, in getting loss and damage reported, but also doing the underlying assessments that that lead to the extended information. And this the report, a review on loss and damage in the Caribbean, 1994 to 2024, is published. It's a publication from this year, and
Yeah, so it's a very relevant recent report.
Yeah, very. Yeah, I think this will be extremely valuable to our countries, and we also host a climate transparency platform. So we'd be happy to host all of these resources on the platform to get a wider circulation.
No problem. And I'm also sharing the German Watch report that was discussed, because some of my colleagues in the Berlin office actually contributed to it.
Okay, this one here on calculating the loss and damage finance gap. That must have been a tough exercise, but yeah, but very relevant, especially as I think you made an excellent point that if we can encourage, countries can be encouraged to include loss and damage as within their BTRs, it would be the most immediate vehicle, and right now in 2024 or early next year to get their needs and their references to loss and damage out, and if possible, the costing of the actions that would be required.
Yeah, and it's quite important to look at costing of the response measures to loss and damage, and not just only looking at what was the estimated losses and damages incurred. So I think that's quite important for countries to start considering that in when they're reporting in their BTRs on loss and damage. And that was one of the key points that came out of that review of loss and damage in the Caribbean report. We need to start reporting on the actions and activities to address and respond to loss and damage, because that's where we have the new fund to respond to loss and damage, and we're discussing the new collective quantified goal on climate finance and finance at COP. But climate finance and loss and damage finance is that monies will be on the actions and activities to respond, address, minimize, avert loss and damage, and not specifically on the losses that were incurred due to a climate event. So we have to understand what exactly we need to be reporting on in order to be able to define what our needs are and to be able to access this loss and damage finance.
Absolutely. I think it would be very, it would be crucial, and also to have that understanding of what exactly needs to be reported, and what the finance will address, right? Because there's other costs apart from the rebuilding from the impact, but also on the human costs. Slajan, I see you had your. I thought you were about to say something.
Yeah, yes. Thank you very much, Sasha. It was really great to hear your insightful and informative presentation. So I guess we all learned from you a lot. I'm also not loss and damage expert, just talking about loss and damage in terms of the BTR reporting, potential reporting. And I would say that there is a lot of uncertainties around the loss and damage in general, since, you know, from we do not have agreed methodologies and approaches for assessment. And also we don't have internationally internationally agreed definition. But in all of that, it's very positive what I've heard of you, that Caribbean country already reported on their losses and damages within their NDCs and maybe some other reports. So I think since you within the report recommended that Caribbean need to report on loss and damage, that many Caribbean countries will be able to report, since they already have certain data and assessments on their loss and damage. Also, you said that current studies on loss and damage and assessment focuses on specific events. Yeah, that's the most common approach now, since we don't have methodologies to provide and to assess total loss and damage experience from the multiple climate negative events and hazards. And I really hope that this will improve with time. And also for that, resources and support is very much needed, especially for small island countries and all countries, all developing countries. Also, I agree very much with your recommendation from the study that it's really necessary to develop common approach for assessment of the loss and damage, not just assessment and reporting. One certain framework for that we have within the BTR, but also we need maybe even some detailed studies and reports in order to be able to assess the situation and accordingly plan our measures and actions in order to reduce these negative effects of the climate hazards. So what I would like to stress also, as you said, that Caribbean countries need to report, or you recommended that Caribbean countries need to report their loss and damage within their BTRs. It's very important to do so, since international community needs to know about the impacts of the climate change and the hazards that Caribbean countries are coping with, and to gain recognition for what you are doing in your countries, to stress the urgency and the needs for support. So that's why I really would like to underline this recommendation, and also to put that in the context of the reporting of the loss and damage within the BTR. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much once again. It was, we don't have often the opportunity to speak with a loss and damage expert or expert team, and to hear studies on the loss and damage, since many countries that we work with are really, as I said, in very initial stage of the tracking and recording loss and damage. I would say not reporting, then just recording. So thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you, Slajana, and Sasha for. I think the interventions were excellent, very relevant, and yeah, I hope our colleagues feel charged and motivated to really yeah, really report as you know to the extent that is possible on loss and damage, and yeah, take heed of the recommendations and the different tools that are available. Um, I would like to ask if anyone else from the room has any other questions for our guests, Sasha or Slajana, from any of the two sessions, whether on the tools or on the requirements for the adaptation BTR. Okay, if not, then I would like to once again extend uh, extreme thank you to our guests. It's always a pleasure uh, to have experts in the room, and especially those who are from the region. It makes it very relevant. And yeah, Sasha, it was lovely to meet you, and I think we will definitely be looking forward to hearing more from you and the rest of the CA team on future on topics in the future. I'd like to thank also our resident adaptation expert, Slajana Bundalo from the CIBIT GSB team, and as usual, our network, the audience and the countries that we serve and support. Thank you for joining this fourth, and this is the last technical session on the adaptation webinar series for reporting on the ETF of the Paris Agreement. We do have one final session. This one will be a global experience sharing session. So we will have a global experience sharing from a developed country. So that is the Netherlands, and also from the global NAP network. So we will have this last final session on Monday, October 28th at the same time. And we really look forward to having you on our last session. Thank you so much for who have joined for all sessions so far. We do appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, thanks so much for having me. And I also share my presentation with you, Brittany, to share with the participants. So thanks so much. Bye.
Thanks. Thank you so much. We'll be sharing all of these resources on the event page on the Climate Transparency platform.
Okay, so, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye, and have a nice day.
Thank you to us. A great job, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Brittany.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. You too.